Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third and the last day of the 32nd Africa Public Relations Conference. It has been a virtual conference this year. I have no doubt that the first 2 days were very exciting. I would like, therefore, before I usher you into day 3, to help you understand all that we did all of the past 2 days. On day 1, we had a very able president of the Africa Development Bank, who was our keynote speaker. He spoke to us about various projects that the Africa Development Bank had been doing on the continent and all the work they had been doing to move the continent forward. Now, he left us with 2 charges. The first was to say, don't deny reality, but don't debrand yourself. The second charge he left us with was the responsibility for storytelling across the continent. Day 2 was very exciting as well. In day 2, we had various speakers. We had the chairman for Edelman Trust speak to us about the trust barometer. And we could see that in this year, I believe that he had Nigeria included, so it was new data. We saw trust, with governments and trust also, between organizations and the society. But I think for us, it reinforced that principal role, which is as a bridge between organizations and society to ensure that all that we do builds trust. Again, we had leadership conversations that reminded us, more than ever, to listen and to lead with empathy. And we also had conversations from an inclusion and diversity expert who spoke to us about biases. It has been a very exciting past 2 days, and I'm sure that you do have much more learnings than I have written as well. I know that the Secretariat has put together a summary and also has presentations from the different persons who presented. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience. I said to you that it has been lonely, just looking at people on the screen, but you have been very gracious, to engage via the chat, engage via the virtual networking. So it's very nice to see you this morning, and we will kickstart things. I'd like to say to you not to go anywhere. It will be a quick and very valuable session today. Today, we'll be rounding up at 1 p.m. South African time, which I believe is 12 noon Nigerian time, and I think would be 11 p.m. Ghanaian time and about 11 p.m. Moroccan time. And Kamal, if you are here, feel free to pop in the chat the correct Moroccan time. So without further ado, we will go straight into today's agenda. But the first thing that we will do today is to take a goodwill message from an APRA ambassador. I would like, therefore, to invite on stage Maxime Biha. Maxime Biha is an APRA ambassador, and as I invite him to the virtual stage, I'd like to ask everyone to please give him a virtual warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm bringing on the virtual stage Maxime Biha.
Thank you very much, and good morning, dear friends. Good morning, Paul, Jordan, Yomi, Taivo, all of my friends. Really sorry that we are not together these days, because we had excellent memories, being together, networking, exchanging different points of view, but the whole world had changed, and we should count on these changes. And you know much better than me that the changes reflected on our business public relations in a way like most probably on any other business did not. About 10 years ago, when we were discussing with the one and only Paul Holmes in Davos, the changes in business, then he used the word tsunami of social media, and he remembers this very well. So the social media indeed brought tsunami to our business and changed it upside down. Today, we have the tsunami of coronavirus. Tomorrow, we will have many other tsunamis, and we in the public relations business should be absolutely ready to meet them, to cope with them, to manage with them. And this will be most probably the nature of our business in the forthcoming years. What I feel in my day-to-day business, in my company, in the various international communities which are involved is that public relations business changed in a way that now we are something in between publishers, editors, and reporters. The public relations sector.
I'm not sure if I'm the only one who cannot hear you. I worry that you have maybe unwittingly muted.
No, it's okay. Did you hear the beginning?
May you please just step back about 2 lines?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. So
we
the
did
most
hear the beginning. Max, we heard you at the beginning. We heard you at the beginning. Yes, we did. We did.
Thank you.
You just went up for a second. So you can start from there.
We are public relations experts, are just something like in between publishers, editors, and reporters. And this is the total change in our business, for my understanding, for the past couple of years. Publishers, because we own media. And this is the main characteristics of a publisher, to own media. We own our social media, we own the media of our clients, we operate them, we manage them. Editors, because we create content. And this is our most powerful tool, the content which we create, no matter it's a text content, visual, podcasts, audio, or whatever, but this is our tool. So, and this is the most important job of the editors. And number 3, reporters, because in this content, we should have some news. We should have something important, something interesting. So I started, first of all, thank you very much for this honor to greet you, Yomi and APRA friends and members, and as I say very often, brothers and sisters. But also, we may have a lot of tsunamis in the past and in the future, and we must be aware, but only Africa is one. So One Africa, thank you very much, and good luck of the third day of this amazing summit. I love you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beha. Thank you. I mean, I'm sure that we share the same sentiments, of not being, around, with you. I remember seeing you, I believe it was in Rwanda and perhaps even Botswana. So you are definitely, a frequent at the conference. So thank you so much for the kind wishes.
Thank you.
So we are tracing to today's agenda. And I think our first presenters are already here. I can see them. But first to tell you what they will be speaking about, and then I would read their profiles and we'll go straight into it. So our first discussion today, it's about how CEOs and societal leaders can define a post-pandemic agenda for the organizations and a renewed role for business to make a positive impact on society. Now, the focus is on corporate purpose and employee engagement. I would like to invite on stage, first and foremost, Jordan Rittenbury. Jordan is the chairman and chief executive for Middle Eastern Africa for Edelman. Jordan, please, could you take the virtual stage? Welcome. And to support him, it's someone who I'm giving a big smile already because it's nice to see him. We typically would see him physically at the conference. Is a founder of Provoke Media and the convener of the Sabre Awards. I'd like to invite on the virtual stage, Mr. Paul Holmes. Can you please give him a round of welcome? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for that generous introduction. I'm delighted to be here and also unhappy to be here. Unhappy because, as you know, I've been to events in Mauritius and Casablanca and Botswana and Rwanda, and I would much rather be in any of those places or in Dar es Salaam, which I was very much looking forward to, than sitting here in my office in London for what feels like the 10,000th day of lockdown. Talking to people on a computer screen. You're going to be seeing a lot of me, so I'm going to try and structure this so that my various guests throughout the morning get the lion's share of the attention. And I'm delighted to be kicking off the Into Summit part of the APRA conference with Jordan Rittenbury. And first of all, Jordan, congratulations on your promotion. The last time I saw you on this stage, the only thing you were in charge of was Africa, and now you've got a bigger remit, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for that, Paul. And what was interesting is when we initially began, talking about the role of me taking over as chairman of Middle East and Africa, I was very adamant with Richard Edelman and Ed Williams that I have to remain the CEO of Africa because we're still executing our African strategy, and I need to be involved in the day-to-day of the business here on the continent. Where we've been growing and growing. We're only about halfway across the river, so still a lot of work to do. But I couldn't be more excited to retain my role in Africa more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's great that somebody from Africa is getting larger, wider responsibility in other parts of the world. So that's a good sign, I think. I think I want to start by looking at the impact of the coronavirus on our business, the public relations business, because I feel like when the virus struck and we started thinking about the pandemic, sort of 15 months ago, we were all very uncertain about the future. I know that we were. Provoke did a series of surveys of agency professionals in particular, and the first survey that we did indicated a pretty high degree of trepidation. People were expecting a steep decline in revenues. They were obviously expecting travel and retail and events and sponsorships to be very hard hit. But they were, I think it's fair to say, somewhere between pessimistic and apocalyptic about where this was going to take us. And by the end of the year, we'd seen that, if not quite flip on its head, we'd seen at least the beginnings of a robust recovery, and the tone at that point became that the PR industry had been very resilient, that the PR industry had really stepped up and proven its value, or been rewarded for the value that it delivered. Did you see the same sort of thing in your business and in the African business in general?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, one of the things about doing business in Africa that we've seen is it can be quite volatile. And, you can see really big swings in your business, whether it's things like, elections, or what have you, you're going to see your business change. And I think, at 1 month in May or June, our revenue, was down, frankly, almost 35-40% year over year. So we did see a big decrease in revenue. And, obviously clients, our prospects weren't issuing RFPs. We were having clients put programs on hold, projects sort of get delayed and kicked out. So it was extremely worrisome at some point. Thankfully, we fought very hard and were able to keep all of our staff. But we did see a lot of swings. At the end of 2020, when we look at the year as a calendar year, Edelman, at the end of the day, grew 10% in Africa, which I thought was astounding. But a lot of it was because a number of our clients really did see the value that PR was able to bring to them. So while some of our more sort of consumer-centric programs that are focused on influencers and events and activations, while a lot of those might have scaled back or been put on pause, more of our reputation, corporate communications, crisis communications work, really did, rise to the top. And that's where we actually saw clients increasing budget, and Kenya Airways is one of our largest clients in Kenya. And, one of my colleagues will speak about our work there during the pandemic. Obviously, airlines were probably one of, if not the hardest hit, businesses across the industry. But, we really did see our council, also evolving and changing to where we weren't solely focused on giving communications advice. We were actually sitting in boardrooms with our clients giving, business advice. I mentioned yesterday we were speaking to one of our clients, a very large, player who was looking at how they should respond to, the pandemic in certain ways. And they were looking at some of the actions that they could take. And our counsel to them was, look, you need to stand tall. You're one of Africa's largest institutions. Do what's right. Help the citizens of South Africa and Africa, and you'll be paid back tenfold. This is not a reputational thing. This is a do what's right thing. And thankfully, they made the right decision. And their reputation really has been quite resilient and gone up. So very happy that they did that.
We'll come back to that in a minute, because I think that's an interesting starting point for what happened to our profession over the last 12 months. But I want to ask you generally, I think in the years that I've been doing this, I've heard two different versions of what happens to public relations when things get tough, right? So there are the glass half empty people who are convinced that when times are tough, public relations is a really easy item to cut, because the link between what we do and the immediate short-term business impact of what we do has not always been well established. And so it's a nice to have, but not a need to have function. The other point of view, which I've heard as well, which is more of a glass half full perspective, is that because public relations is relatively inexpensive compared to some of the adjacent disciplines like advertising, that in tough times there can be a counter-cyclical effect where people say, okay, well, we can't afford a big ad campaign, let's put the money into PR instead. I'm wondering, first of all, whether you buy into either of those wisdoms, and second of all, what, if anything, was different this time?
Yeah, and I'm always a glass half full kind of guy. So I always see the opportunity. I think some of it depends on, and the way I would cut it is, it depends on the organization and how the organization typically views the communications and marketing function and how that works together. Not to pick on any one business, but like a KFC is largely a marketing driven organization, and that's where they put a majority of their spend. So I think they might have less of a focus or a perceived value on communications, because so much of their spend goes just directly to marketing. Whereby other corporates, like say a Standard Bank or a Telecom or First Development Bank or whatever it might be, they're not as marketing or advertising driven. And they're the type of organization that also invites public relations to have a seat at the table, because they believe in the value that it can add to their business. And they also believe very deeply in things like an ESG strategy, and how can we leverage ESG and these types of programs in order to drive our business forward and communicate the ways in which we're adding value across the continent, and the way in which we're giving back and doing the right thing and really being, responsible corporate citizens.
So I want to look now at, again, those early days of the crisis, where when I started talking to people about what was going on in their business, the bright spots were some of the things that you mentioned earlier. The first of which was employee communications. And a lot of companies turned inwards and realized that they had to communicate very aggressively and very with a lot of empathy with their employees to show that they were considering employee safety and putting employees first. Again, was that your experience, and to what extent was that sustained throughout the sort of last 12 months?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think looking back on it, never before has tone been more important, right? And empathy, to your point, with employee communications. And what was interesting, and we conducted a survey about it actually, that looked at the cadence of communications. And we actually saw that employees wanted to hear from their employer daily, frankly. And while that might seem like overkill, when we're in the midst of such a massive global crisis, that's where individuals really have this sense of safety. Your employer and the organization, that you work for is something very close and near to you. You know the organization, you know why they make particular choices, your friends work there, you know the leadership team, et cetera. So it's something that's much more closer to you than just business in general. Like, it almost becomes quite familial. So you have a high level of trust in the communications that come out from it. But that's really, people wanted to hear from their employers. They wanted to hear, what are you doing to keep me safe? Also, what is your perspective on the pandemic? What are some of the things I need to keep in mind as an individual in addition to an employee? So I actually think it's an incredibly powerful thing. I think that level of sustained communications we saw for 4 or 5 months, I think it's generally been backed off of. But what I hope the good that comes out of this is a more increased focus on internal communications and employee experience. It's not simply an HR function, right? It is a true value add to the business. Our employees, and this is often said, in a bit of a cliche fashion, they're our most valuable assets. We need to ensure they feel safe and comfortable so that they can do their job, pandemic or not.
Well, and I feel like in times like this as well, the notion that employees are your ambassadors to all other stakeholder groups was more relevant than ever. And certainly in some of the developed markets, for example, we saw employees being quite vocal, about companies that were doing it right. So there were a lot of employees going online and saying, thank God my management is puts your safety first. And when you're in a customers facing business, that's very important. But also the companies that got it wrong, that didn't necessarily prioritize employee safety. And there you saw people, taking to Twitter and developing sort of hashtag campaigns that vilified individual companies. So we as consumers knew an awful lot about how different companies were managing their employee base during this crisis. And we, to a certain extent, I think, judged them on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, there's nowhere to hide, right? And I think it is interesting to see the employees that were going out and talking about the ways in which their employer was making them feel safe or unsafe. And I think there were a lot of really good examples from right here in Africa as to how businesses were responding both at an employee standpoint as well as much more broadly. I think we really saw some great things that organizations and businesses did to really help educate the mass population as well. I think a lot of people will talk about the campaigns that Coca-Cola and McDonald's did, to highlight, in the early days of the pandemic, like the Golden Arches were separated to talk about, social distancing, and Coca-Cola was moved apart. But even MTN dedicated almost all of their advertising spend for a good month on consumer awareness and consumer education. Lifebuoy did the same thing in terms of educating people about hand washing. So a lot of African organizations really did stand up for their employees, but also the general public. And I think these are just really great stories that are happening here on the continent that show, the work being done here internally and externally really is quite world class.
So that was, I think, the thing that was most interesting and most pleasantly surprising to me as an observer of the industry. Obviously, that phase one, if you like, of crisis communication followed by employee communication and employee reassurance was something that I thought had to happen and would be very good for those firms that had invested in employee engagement as a skill. What I was less sure about was the purpose, CSR, cause-related marketing stuff that has become more commonplace in the last 5 or 10 years. But again, often feels like something that companies can quickly shuttle off to one side if times are tough and they're watching every penny. And instead, what happened was we almost saw a doubling down on purpose. We also almost saw greater investment, I think, in CSR-related activities. Again, did you see that in Africa, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely saw a lot of organizations really standing tall and giving back and showing up and doing their part. And that was just so important to see. And there's a lot of sort of unsung heroes that were doing a lot of things that weren't talked about, like dedicating their or giving all of their advertising spend to the government to issue PSAs, or donating PPE, or digging in and manufacturing PPE, right? And I think it was really great to see, and particularly when you think about, also businesses in the food sector, making sure that people were staying fed, people were staying healthy, because as things are locked down, you can't go out and earn a living in many cases, depending on your job. But I was extremely proud to see a lot of the work being done across the continent, and a lot of companies actually making the right decision. And I think that's the key thing. It's no longer enough for business to do well. They have to do good also, right? And I think, what's also interesting is, from a communication standpoint, again, a number of organizations were talking about what they did in, very small ways, which I think is good. But a lot of organizations were just focused on getting it right. And I think that's the important thing, particularly when the world is in a state of crisis. But we really did see a lot of focus still on CSI programs and making sure we're giving back. And I think we've actually seen a lot more corporations coming out of the pandemic, again, to your point, doubling down and placing more of an emphasis on it. I mentioned the other day, we were going through an RFP process, and one of the questions was, it was all around an organization's purpose strategy and how would we solve, or how would we tell their story around purpose, right? And one of the things that they asked us was, what is going to be the biggest challenge in telling our story around purpose from a communication standpoint? And our response, frankly, was actually, like, the challenge is going to be on you. Like, are you going to live through? Are you going to keep your promises? Are you going to live up to the expectations? Are you going to do all of the things that you said you're going to do? Because if you do those things, and if you do really give back and do so in a meaningful and important way, the communications challenge is almost non-existent. We can do this.
The other pleasant surprise for me, in a sort of Northern Hemisphere perspective at least, was the way in which companies embraced and engaged with the Black Lives Matter movement. And the murder of George Floyd triggered something in big American and British and European companies that I, again, would not necessarily have predicted, which was an engagement with political issues. Now, I'm assuming that the whole Black Lives Matter idea has a different resonance in Africa than it does in the North. But did that become an issue for companies in Africa? And did you find companies vocally speaking out on those kinds of political issues?
Absolutely, we did. And Black Lives Matter, while it originated in the US, definitely has resonance across Africa. And we did see a number of corporations speaking out on it. Additionally, a lot of things surrounding gender-based violence, LGBTQ here in Africa as well, very, very important. And actually, and as you know, Paul, when companies speak out on societal issues, like it adds value to the business. And that's what people want to hear. People want to know that corporations are standing up for societal issues. And, particularly here in South Africa, we've seen a number of organizations speaking out against gender-based violence, but also taking action. And I think the way in which those messages and those actions have landed are truly stunning. They're very, very powerful. And I would encourage, more and more organizations across the continent to stand up to issues and to have a say, because it's not about, simply having a position, but it's about taking action and doing good and doing the right thing, because it does matter. And this is what consumers want to see and hear from you, to know that values align and that you're more than just a group of shareholders, right?
Do you think that the crisis has changed the kind of leadership, the style of leadership that we expect from CEOs? And is it a permanent change?
I do think it's changed, and I do hope it's a permanent change. I think we've really learned that organizations need to be more empathetic, and organizations are not black and white. There are many shades, and it's not just about, again, as I said, doing well. You must also do good, and it's not about shareholders anymore. It's about, you know, all of the stakeholders that an organization has to touch. I think I really do hope it's permanent, but I think what we've seen from businesses and executives over the last 18 months has been good. I hope we're just getting started. I think, you know, the last year we've seen so many different issues at play, from the pandemic, from gender-based violence, from Black Lives Matter, and like there's a lot to unpack. And I think organizations are slowly but surely realizing they have to take a stand, they have to have a position, and they have to, you know, not just focus on making money, but giving back and doing the right thing as well. I sure do hope it's permanent again.
Yeah. I wonder about sort of the employee engagement side of things too, because I've always felt that that was an area that was either neglected or undervalued, or perhaps just not really delivered on by PR agencies.
Yeah.
It's an area where often the assignment goes to a different kind of firm, not necessarily a PR firm. I'm wondering what you see for the future of employee engagement, and whether that will continue to grow, or whether they'll go back to being a sort of forgotten stakeholder group once the crisis is over.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think employee engagement was always some sort of small specialty within corporate communications or reputation management. There were small groups doing it. There were boutiques who would focus on employee engagement, but what we often found is a lot of those boutiques were also just as focused on putting up posters in the kitchen or in the hallway to talk about certain initiatives. But it really has become a thing. It's increased in value and importance, and it's something that Edelman, frankly, globally, we've been talking about, you know, for a couple of years now, and we keep, like, you know, trying to reinvest our efforts to ensure we're at the forefront. But I don't think we're going backwards. I think this one is only going to grow and grow and increase in importance, particularly as so many individuals are now moving towards a hybrid work environment, or, you know, really a more ongoing work from home status. I think making sure we're reaching and connecting with employees is more important now than ever. And there's not one single place to capture them, like the workplace, right? And we know employees aren't reading emails or workplace groups or whatever, or, you know, company newsletters. I think we have to be more strategic and thoughtful in how we reach individuals, particularly when they're so scattered throughout the world now.
I'm also interested in how business is going to respond to I mean, because the crisis, you know, as tempting as it is to think in the US, where 50% of people have been vaccinated, or here in the UK, where the vaccination numbers are good, that the worst is over. The crisis is not done with us yet. And there's the question of getting vaccines to people. And there's also the question of getting people to accept the vaccines. And vaccine hesitancy is a big issue in different parts of the world. How are companies helping with those two issues, both getting access to vaccines, which I guess is an issue for the pharma industry, and one that has the ability to undo a lot of the goodwill that pharma has earned developing the vaccines if they get it wrong? And for other companies who have perhaps a role to play in distribution and acceptance?
Yeah, and great question. I think particularly when you look at, you know, the global markets that Edelman looks at, vaccine hesitancy is extremely high in places like South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. So it's going to take a long time, and we're not even close to reaching herd immunity, just if, not even including access. People just aren't willing to get the vaccine, right? So I think we see a high degree of hesitancy here, that hopefully, I believe, as we get more access to vaccines, government and business will again, hopefully step up and develop communications programs and strategies to truly educate the public. And I think local governments need to partner with groups like pharma companies, with groups like the WHO or the Cleveland Clinic or whatever it might be, to ensure that we're reaching consumers and building levels of trust among consumers that, look, the vaccine is real, here's what it does and here's why it's important. It's not some cocked up idea that's really just designed to sterilize people, which is what we've heard in places like Kenya, right? So I think we really need to focus on that to ensure people are willing to get the vaccine. But access is going to be a challenge for some time. I don't know the latest data, but South Africa has about 55 million individuals. I think we're now inching up to about 1 million being vaccinated. So still a very, very long way to go. But I think we'll again need to call on business to, hey, we need you to open up centers. We need you to dedicate resources to help us vaccinate the population. I think African nations will get a lot of donations of vaccines from countries like US and Canada and the UK, where they've ordered more vaccines than their population. So hopefully that'll come. But I also know that we've chatted to a number of pharmaceutical companies. They are turning their focus and they are turning to Africa. It's not a forgotten continent, but they are looking and seeing, okay, the US, the UK, a lot of the Western world, they're getting vaccines. That's great. But here's this population that still has a ways to go. We need to do something here. And I'm seeing some very encouraging things.
I do think there's a big role for employers there, because your survey shows that employers or businesses are trusted by their people more than governments are. And so maybe they can credibly make the case for vaccination in a way that governments perhaps can't. I want to end with a quick question about our industry and what the lasting impact on our industry is. Obviously, for a business that is about collegiality and is about communication and is about bringing people together, this has really posed some unique challenges. Brainstormings suddenly happen on screens rather than in rooms, lots of creative accoutrement. To what extent do we go back to normal? And to what extent does some of the, working from home, flexible working approaches, to what extent will they be permanent, do you think?
I believe they will be permanent in many organizations. It is challenging to brainstorm. And when we're working on a big pitch, for example, it's easy to be in the same room and have that dialogue, right? But I think, like most organizations, we've found, look, we can trust our employees. They're adults. And if we can't trust them, we shouldn't be employing them anyway, right? And I do think that we will see, and it'll vary dramatically market by market and business by business, but I do think a hybrid work environment to some degree is here to stay broadly on the continent. I don't think it'll be as loose as it is or as open in places like the US, but I do think we're seeing it here. We have 85 people in our office here in Johannesburg. We're like averaging about 20 or 30 per day, and that's good. Like, that's fine. We're able to get the job done. And if we need to come together in small teams, we can still do that. So I think it all is varying. But I do think if we continue to focus on employee communications and bringing individuals close, having the right technology and IT in order to enable them to do their jobs, then there's no reason we shouldn't go back to a full-time work environment.
The only thing that I'll say on that topic is, I wasn't sure what we would see in the Sabre Awards this year, because I've always felt that, that bouncing ideas off people required you to be together. That really great creative thinking came from that sort of tension that you can only get when you've got 5 people in a room throwing ideas at each other. And if this year's Sabre Awards proves anything to me, it's that we can be just as creative sitting in our kitchens wearing pajama bottoms and a t-shirt. as we can in the office. The level of creativity did not decline at all. And so I'm very encouraged that whatever the future throws at us, as an industry, we're resilient and flexible enough to improvise our way out of it and around it. That's our 40 minutes, Jordan. Thank you very much indeed.
Great. Thank you for your time. Always a pleasure, Paul.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
You too.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jordan. Very valuable conversations, you know, about the sector and the challenges we face, the current trends, the demands being made on corporates by the society. Thank you, very valuable. I'm afraid we're unable to take any questions at this time, Komi. May I please encourage you to please just pop the questions in the box. I believe that Jordan and Paul will just look through and she'll be able to respond. So thank you so much again, gentlemen. We're right off to the next speaker. Look, I think before we call the next speaker, I have made a few assumptions, which is that everyone who has been on the call in the past 3 days is a member of the Africa Public Relations Association. This may not be correct. If you are someone who has just joined us for the conference and isn't a member as yet, may I please encourage you to look in the chat box. The Secretariat would have details of how you can join. I believe the website details will be in there in the chat box. I believe also that we would have an email address and a number, perhaps to make it quicker so you can connect. Also just leaning in to say that if you do have outstanding dues, it would be great that you connect to the Secretariat to find out what is outstanding and how you can make this payment. So just moving in quickly to the next speaker, we're quite conscious that the continent has a teeming population of youths, and we are going to have Gomotsesang Motswaswe. She's going to be taking us through the Africa Youth Survey. Gomotsegan is a senior consultant for BCW. I believe she's also doing this with Paul Holmes. And I'm just going to ask Paul, if you are already on the virtual stage, please remain there. I'm just going to, in 2 minutes, tell you about Gometsesang. She's a skilled PR and comms practitioner. She's done this for 8 years, looking after stakeholder and media relations. She's also worked, you know, in the public policy environment, all here in South Africa. She's a published author and a blogger. She's got a BA degree from the University of Witwatersrand. She also it's a graduate of the Smalland Women in Leadership Program. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please give a virtual warm welcome to Gometsesang?
Thank you, Nkiru. Thank you.
I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your full name.
No.
Robin tells me that Gomo is acceptable, except I'm supposed to do something with that G that sounds like clearing my throat. Anyway.
It's guttural, yes.
Yeah. All right.
Sure you don't want to try, Paul?
Well, anyway, I'm delighted to have you here today to talk about this survey, which was submitted for a SABRE award and won a SABRE award, and I thought was a very important piece of research into what's going on in the African market. The findings are fascinating, and we will get to the findings, but I wanted to talk a little bit at first about the inspiration for this survey, what the thinking behind it was, and why you decided to focus on youth.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you so much, Nkiru, for the moderation. Paul, it really is a great honor to sit and talk to you today. Just in terms of the African Youth Survey, it is the brainchild of Ivar Echikovic, and he is a South African-born industrialist, social entrepreneur, as well as a philanthropist. So, you know, as much as Ivar has been listed and ranked among Africa's 100 most influential people, in his own words, he says, you know, he struggled to kind of relay the optimism around Africa, its possibilities, its people, whenever he traveled abroad to Europe and North America. So the survey was actually just a natural progression from that to say, let's give the youth themselves a platform to tell the world what their hopes are, what their aspirations are, what their challenges are, and what they hope for in general. So that's what gave birth to the survey.
Right. Why do you think that this hadn't been done before? Because in terms of both the number of markets that you went out to and the size and scale of the survey, it really was, I think, unprecedented. I hadn't seen anything similar in the past.
So in terms of BCW, we had worked together with PBS, which is the international research firm, to work on the Arab youth survey. So we had already started somewhere. But in terms of Africa, I mean, there have been, isolated surveys and studies and so forth, but none as, scientific and focused as the African Youth Survey. And particularly because the Itchikowitz Family Foundation, which is the foundation that I've started, wanted to really tell the story of Africa using real and quantitative data for businesses, for governments, the AU, the UN, as well as NGOs to kind of have an insight into what makes the youth tick. I mean, we've had a lot of reports, but none as tangible as this survey. And I think what's very key is that the Itchikowitz Family Foundation and PBS will be running the survey year on year just to benchmark all of these matrices that they've looked at in 2020.
Well, I know that the Arab Youth Survey has sort of grown every year, not just in scale, but in importance. And it's now, I think, something that people both in the region and in the wider world look forward to and anticipate and feel is a really valuable source of information about what's going on in the Arab world. And it's been very encouraging, I think, to see the younger generation in the Arab world so optimistic and so progressive and so invested in their values. Did you see a similar sort of cohesion across the African markets that you surveyed? In other words, is there such a thing as the African youth, and do they have a shared set of values and beliefs?
Well, I think the important thing to note is, and one key element that the survey wanted to dispel is that there's just one Africa, which the rest of the world still perceives as one country, whereas there's 54 countries on the continent. And therefore, this means that there are people with different cultures, diverse cultures, traditions, and value systems. And really that is what the survey wanted to kind of sift down into, because we cannot overestimate the value of data in this day and age. I mean, it's very, very worrying that in 2021, you still get brands and businesses who think that you can speak with the same voice across the entire continent. And that is really a misconception that the survey itself wanted to dispel. Now we've got actual data that shows us that Africa is different. You cannot have a blanket approach.
But one of the things that when I was reading the report struck me was that there were areas of similarity, right? So first of all, you talked about Afro-optimism, which seemed to be shared, I mean, greater and lesser degrees, but it seemed to be shared by youth in general. Tell me a little bit about that, and what do you think that means for the future?
That's a very good point, Paul. You are right that the Afro-optimism is shared widely across the continent, and all of our 4,200 respondents who were, we had a perfect gender split of 50-50, looking at youth from 18 to 24 years of age, and from both an urban and rural perspective. And all of these respondents, majority were very optimistic about Africa's future. And it's very different from what the world and the stories that the world believes about Africa. And that's very encouraging. It's very encouraging because in the next decade, Africa will have the largest population of the youth. And it's very important that the youth has such a positive outlook on the continent themselves, which is a great vantage point to tell the rest of the world that, hey, we're here, we've arrived, and we're ready to innovate, to be creative, to dispel the myths that the world believes about Africa.
At the same time, though, there were a number of people who expressed concern about the direction that the continent was headed, and wanted greater African unity, I think, as a sort of remedy to that. How does that fit into the overall picture?
So it's very interesting because when we looked at the outcomes of the survey, a lot more youth, Paul, were very optimistic about Africa unity as opposed to the conditions in their own countries. So that's very telling. And I think a key, one of the key outcomes coming out from this year is really the African Free Trade Agreement, which is a key development for the continent. And I think it will be interesting to see how relations will develop between all of the countries on the continent, and how the youth will ultimately respond to that.
The other thing that, or another thing that I thought was interesting was the degree of optimism about the opportunities that this generation would have, right? So there was a lot of focus on entrepreneurship and a lot of focus on the idea that, they could be their own bosses and make a difference. Were you surprised by that? And what do you think that means for the future?
So it's actually interesting to note that, one of the key challenges that the majority of the youth alluded to is corruption in government. And when you look at their entrepreneurial aspirations, a lot of them already have a business plan idea in place. They already know what social venture they would like to go into. And I mean, when asked what they would do if they were given $100, 50% of them actually said they would either invest it or start a business. So African youth are not looking to government to assist them. And more interestingly, they view foreign direct investment into the continent as a form of modern colonialism. So they are all about doing things themselves. They're self-starters, they're movers and shakers. And I think it's very beautiful to watch where the continent is going. Yes.
That issue that you just raised is an interesting one for a lot of companies, obviously, because as you say, there was this feeling that international development, international investment in Africa has both positive and negative implications. What do you think that means for companies who need to reach out to these young people, who will need to hire them and employ them one day, but also sell products to them, and a company's going to have to do a much better job of engaging with young people across the continent based on this survey?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, Paul, this survey is a very important piece of data, not only for governments, but for businesses and brands combined. And you know what? I think it's very important that brands tailor their engagement with the youth. It's all in the data, and when you have data that is irrefutable, then you have everything you need. It's very important that our brands speak to our youth in terms of a language they understand, in the nuances that are relevant to them, because that is the only way they will get to them.
And what about foreign governments and attitudes towards the states of the West and the rest of the world.
So it's actually quite interesting to note that there was an almost 50-50 split between how our youth feels about China and the US, which are two of the most dominant forces on the continent. And the US just came up a little bit, just with a minor advantage, and China just below that. And it really is quite interesting that, you know, even when Donald Trump was still president, that is the result that came out.
I mean, you don't have the data for this yet, but my guess would be that China has been closing the gap. That, you know, my experience in Africa the last 4 or 5 years when I visited is that there is a level of engagement from China that is that puts the US to shame in Africa.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think the US likes it very much. And I think just to revert to your conversation with Jordan, where he talked about, you know, essentially how the continent will bounce back after COVID, it's been very interesting to note, you know, China's own economy being on the upswing after the pandemic. And it will be very interesting to see how that will filter into Africa, and obviously the opportunities that will be open to the youth at that point.
How deeply did you dive into attitudes about responses to the pandemic, and how big an issue was that in this survey?
Paul, I think those will be key matrices to watch in the next survey, definitely.
But I noticed that infectious diseases was one of the challenges that young people focused on as sort of one of the big challenges of the next few years.
So this was actually in the last 5 years. If you look at the survey, Paul, which is readily available on the website, the two key challenges that the youth have outlined is employment. Employment is right at the top, with 26% of our respondents feeling very concerned about that. And the next one was government corruption. So that's very interesting that they are worried about corruption, and again, as I said, they are self-starters. So even if they're not looking to the government to assist them, I mean, government corruption does affect all of us. It does affect how, you know, access to finance and those kinds of elements.
Right. I was going to make a plea for more questions, because I think this is a fascinating topic. If you've read the report, you'll already know. If not, I suggest getting a hold of it and doing a deep dive, because it's very interesting. We do have what looks more like a statement than a question, but I'll ask you to respond to it anyway. This is from Ebang, who says, increasing intra-Africa under the CFTA will run into hurdles unless there is free movement of Africans between and among countries. Visa issues on the continent question trust and inhibit tourism among Africans within Africa. Tell me a little bit about whether there's anything that you can see in the survey from young people about that. And I will simply draw on my own experience in Europe, which is as when the UK was part of the European Union, one of the things that people loved was this ability to move freely between countries, to go to work, or even to, you know, just backpack through other countries without any hurdles. And that's one of the reasons young people were much more in favor of the EU than older people who voted us out of it. And I wonder whether you see that sense of you know, young people wanting to explore all of Africa and enjoy all that Africa has to offer, rather than being, you know, I don't want to say stuck in their own country, but rooted.
So this is not one of the elements that the survey looked at, Paul, but I think that's an element that obviously governments would need to look at. I'm not an expert on the matter, but if anybody wants a deep dive into the actual report itself, it is available on the website. But I think as a young person myself, I would say it would really benefit us to be able to go in and out of the country and do business elsewhere. Definitely, but that's something that governments themselves need to iron out.
Right. We talked, by the way, about the challenge for business in, particularly multinational business in connecting with African youth. But one of the other interesting findings was that they really care both about their local communities and about the environment. Does that suggest that companies are going to have to be a lot more conscious of those issues? Again, as they look to both employ and sell to this audience?
So it's quite interesting, Paul, that when African youth were polled on climate change and what they think about it, it ranked very low. They didn't seem to be quite in touch with that or having much care around that. But when the survey dived deeper into other areas, it actually came out strongly that the youth is concerned about the environment and how corporates and multinationals actually conduct their businesses around them. So definitely, Paula would agree that multinationals would have to pay a lot more attention to that, as is anywhere in the world, because I think it's a global thing rather than just an African concern.
It seemed to me reading the summary that people were more concerned about the sort of the local immediate impact rather than the long-term future. So while climate change isn't a concern, the mining industry, for example, has some hurdles to overcome in Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it is a concern.
Right. Tell me a little bit about your plans going forward with this survey, because as I said when we were talking about the Arab Youth Survey, these things become more valuable when you can see year after year how things are changing or how things are staying the same. So this will be done annually now, and the foundation is committed to this as a sort of tentpole.
Yes, absolutely. So the survey will be running year on year, and they will essentially be looking at 10 core countries, which include Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, amongst others, which will be used for benchmarking purposes, but they will be adding new countries every year just to get a different feel and perspective of those markets as well. And again, it's just all about making this kind of data available to policymakers, governments, and NGOs, companies, and so forth, so that we develop some kind of inventory and knowledge around what it is that African youth want, what they aspire to, what's challenging them. How do we talk to African youth when we don't know what they are concerned about? How do we talk to them as brands, as companies, as public relations practitioners? How do we advise our clients differently if we don't have this kind of data at hand?
Right. And just a quick question about the timing of the survey last year, because a lot of these questions went into the field, I think, before the worst of the crises hit last year. So how are you anticipating that will shape what we see next year? Do you have any guesses about what the impact will be of all of the events of the last 12 months?
I could give you my wild,
by the way,
uneducated guess.
I know that asking somebody who loves data to guess is a really bad thing to do, so I apologize, but
so Paul, I think it will be interesting to see the numbers in the next installment of the survey, especially around considerations around corruption in government, as well as obviously there's been a huge uptake in fintech as well as mobile use during this period. And in the current survey, it actually showed that there are around 192 million mobile users in Africa, which is huge. So it will be very interesting to see those numbers in the next installment of the survey, as well as things like, you know, access to finance or corruption in government, who the youth trusts, and so forth. So definitely waiting for that.
Right. And how much did you dive into, or would you like to dive into, areas like social media use by young people, and which channels of communication they trust or spend most time with?
I think it's very interesting, Paul. That's also an area in the current survey where we saw a lot of activity from the youth. In fact, in the survey, it shows that the youth, 50% of the youth do not trust Facebook, and 50% of the youth do not trust WhatsApp. And if you remember that WhatsApp now came out with the new terms of use and so forth, which they kind of stayed on, but it will be interesting to see what the user levels are in the next survey as well, and what other platforms the youth might have jumped onto during this period.
Well, I think, you know, I've been a staunch defender of young people in the US, where millennials and whatever we call the people who come after millennials have been sort of much maligned in recent years by CEOs and others because they're supposedly soft. And I actually think the values of the younger people in the US and Europe are what's going to save the people like me. My generation has messed up an awful lot, and I'm confident that the young people will repair a lot of the damage. I felt the same way when I first saw the Arab Youth Survey that Sunil and his team have been doing for years. And it's very encouraging. Global youth in general, I think, are very clear about what their values are, and the fact that they expect to hold companies and governments accountable to those values. So I think this is a very valuable piece of research, and I thank you for doing it. I thank the foundation for supporting it. And maybe we can end by just talking a little bit about the work of the foundation and how this fits into a bigger picture for Ivan.
Certainly. So the foundation really was started to tell the African story, Paul. As I said in the beginning, Ivor really struggled to tell the African narrative effectively, and that's why he commissioned the Africa Youth Survey, but also kind of to just maintain the African heritage and its biodiversity. Those are the core objectives of the foundation. And I would just like to say, just to add on to your closing comment there, that the youth is a really important demographic to watch out for. It's not necessarily an anomaly. I mean, we've seen a lot of youth-led movements over the years in history, which changed the course of history. So the youth really are change makers, they're movers and shakers, and they get things done. So definitely we shouldn't be ignoring this demographic.
Great, thank you very much indeed. That was terrific. And for those of you watching and listening to this, we really did just skim across the surface of this report. It's what is it, 120 pages or so of really good
Very
data
extensive.
and really good analysis. And I would recommend all of you to dive into it and let your clients know how this new generation is going to impact their businesses and their practices going forward. Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'll just pop in the website address in the chat section for anyone who wants to have a look at the report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Gomez Sagan. I think that was going to be my only question, which is how can we gain access to the report? But thank you so much for having that very valuable conversation around what is the heart of the continent. People have described the youth population quite negatively, saying that there's a ticking time bomb if they aren't correctly engaged. But thank you for helping us, get a bit into their minds and understand them further. So without further ado, we will go right on to the next panel. But actually, I think that I spoke a bit too quickly. If you have been listening and you haven't joined the Africa Public Relations Association as yet, please just scroll back a few lines in the chat box. You would find a how to join message from the APRA Secretariat. You would find the how to join message from the APRA Secretariat. It's also important that you stay up to date with your dues. You can connect to the Secretariat to advise you on the how. So now we are going into the next discussion, which is with the Platinum Sabre Award finalists. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request of you, even before they have come to the virtual stage, that we give them a resounding round of applause for getting to this level in the Sabre Awards nomination. Giving them a virtual applause from here. I hope they can hear me all the way from Johannesburg. Okay, cool stuff. Thank you for supporting that chair. So in no particular order, I'm going to ask that the following persons come on the virtual stage. Odion Aleboa, Chief Executive Officer, Mojion Communications. Welcome. I'd like to invite Ken Kamal, Account Manager, Hill and Knowlton Strategist, Kenya. I'd like also to invite Alfred Nganga, Partner, Oxygen. Also to call onto the virtual stage, Portia Gibbs, Director, Edelman, Kenya. Welcome, welcome, welcome onto the virtual stage. Very nice to see you. I'm going to ask only of you that you spent, Portia, I don't see you on the virtual stage. Not sure why you haven't been spotlighted. Cool stuff, I see you now. I'm going to ask that you spend just 1 minute introducing yourself, and I'm going to go in no particular order. And Portia, can we just, we know that you're director in Edelman, Kenya. May you please just say one more thing about yourself?
One more thing. Well, I was in the South Africa office running the Edelman tech sector team there for several years before moving to Nairobi at the beginning of last year.
Right, okay, cool stuff. So that's two cultural environments you have experienced. Alfred, may you just take anything you think would be useful to us, number of duration you've done this for, just anything from your perspective.
Thank you. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Alfred Nganga. I'm a partner at Oxygen Marketing Communications Limited in Kenya. And happy to join in this panel with the rest of the team and my colleagues across the continent.
Cool, thank you so much, Alfred. Very nice to see you. Ken, can you just tell us one thing in 1 minute? Just a softer level of intro from you.
Oh, I love the people of Africa, but mostly I've done most work in public affairs and most of energy works across many clients. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Odio, do you want to take the virtual floor, or before I hand over to you?
Everyone from Nigeria to South Africa. My name is Odio. My practice is PR, done this for over 15 years now. And we practice across oil and gas, finance, media, aviation, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, excellent. So lovely to see you, and I'm going to consider that the virtual floor is open. Who wants to take the lead in the discussion? Again, Portia, I'm not sure, I'm not picking on you, you're just the first on my virtual screen. So I'm handing over to you to go first. Oh, we need to unmute you. We need to unmute you. Control room, can you see if you're the one who's taking her access? Cool stuff, we can hear her now.
Okay, can I take you through our award entry? Thank you. Okay, so our award entry was for Kenya Airways. We've been working with them since the beginning of last year, and we had a very, very specific brief with them. It was very much a turning point in their history, if you like. So they, as many of you will know, the airline is around 40 years old, and it's had pretty checkered sort of history in the past in terms of mixed sort of leadership, but also it was a national airline that was privatized, and now it's looking at renationalization again as part of a parliament recommendation around the aviation sector reforms. So we were coming in at this point, but we were also compounded by the issue of COVID that we spoke long about over the course of this conference and the impact that COVID has had. So we very much came in with the opportunity to see this as a pivot point, and it was really about how we rebuild Kenya Airways as the pride of Africa, and also really looking at driving sustainability for the business. So we had two key sort of levers that we wanted to work with. It struck us from a strategic point of perspective that we really needed to build trust in Kenya Airways, but we also had a great opportunity because we had new leadership. We had new, very passionate leadership with great success in their own right. So coming into this, we were really at a great opportunity to rebuild trust, not just in the brand, but also in the leadership of Kenya Airways. So our strategy really sat around was informed by the trust data, and I know Jordan's spoken about that during the course of this conference. And we really used a lot of this data to inform us regarding the sentiment on the ground and stakeholder perception, and then how we would pivot that forward. So to give you some idea, I mean, we used quite a lot of the data and we synthesized it down, but we were playing with data that was telling us 85% of people in Kenya believe that shareholders, not stakeholders, are most important to company success. We were also seeing 79% of people were expecting CEOs to lead change rather than waiting for a government to impose it. We saw that 80% of people believe that a business and a company should be able to increase profits as well as contribute to the community within which it operates. And we saw that 65% of people really felt that the way that a brand responds to the crisis is going to impact their long-term buying and purchasing behavior. So we used a lot of this kind of data to really inform our strategy, knowing that we wanted to rebuild trust with Kenya Airways, and we really wanted to use those insights to ensure that we would really hit the mark and start shifting perceptions in the way that we wanted. So based on that, we sort of split our strategy into the short-term goals, mid-term, and the long-term, right? So the short-term goals was very much around COVID and the impacts of COVID. We knew as an airline, we had a responsibility to respond to the COVID crisis and do and contribute in a way that was meaningful to the country. We, from a midterm perspective, knew that we had to align with the government's agenda, because that really was what was going to drive things forward. And from a long-term perspective, it really came down to what I spoke to before. So that was around shifting perceptions and really building trust in the leadership and the airline as a whole. And so the way we really approached it was very much around storytelling. Because we really knew that we had to showcase how KQ is using purpose to help solve and address the COVID crisis. I think that was critical, because at that point in the year last year, people were really looking to brands and companies to understand how they were contributing to solving the pandemic. And Kenya Airways were doing a lot of things from a cargo perspective and a vaccine perspective as well that wasn't readily known. So there were those kind of stories we needed to tell. But we also knew that we really had to contribute to the government's agenda, as I said before. And so one of the sort of key objectives we really had in our program was that rallying stakeholders such as the public, customers, and staff around KQ, we realized will really help encourage decision makers to reconsider the value of investing in the brand. So that was our approach and our sort of creative solution. And I mean, we were really very fortunate with our results. You know, within just 8 months, we were getting over 500 pieces of coverage. Everything was in tier 1 media. But most importantly, we were getting the kind of coverage for leadership that we really wanted to achieve. So Alan Kabuka, who is a spectacular CEO at KQ is really driving change there. And that's one of the things that came through our trust data as well, is, CEOs are expected to lead from the front. They're expected to talk on the issues that are hard to talk about at the moment. They're supposed to lead, sort of lead that direction in the public space. And Alan really has been doing that. So we've been able to capture a lot of coverage for him and really start building awareness around who he is and why he is such a trusted leader for KQ. And together, I think this really helped us get to a point where we were able to generate a lot of sort of topics, and this is obviously ongoing, moving into phase 2 now of our strategy, that are relating to building trust and relating back to the data points that I spoke through earlier, and making sure that we're constantly driving that and constantly bringing awareness to what the new leadership of KQ is doing, and what they are planning for the future. So yeah, in summary, it really was a strategy that was completely embedded in trust, building trust, using the trust data, and using that to really inform the strategy and the media tactics for the program.
So Paul, would you want to? No, that's fine. Alfred, can we just go over to you? Thank you so much, Portia. I think we will go over to Alfred at this time. I understand that Paul is supposed to kind of moderate this, not sure. I think the Secretary just needs to get his attention one more time. So Paul, this is you. This is your panel. But Alfred, you can get going, and I think Paul will just pick up right after you.
Okay, thank you. I think for us is to introduce our entry in this year's SABRE Awards. And the program that we were handling was for a ministry in Kenya that is called the State Housing and Urban Development Department, which is a state ministry and a Ministry of Infrastructure. So the project was called the National Hygiene Program. And one of the key things that we did was to create a branding for it called Kazi Mtaani. Basically, this was coming in the back of the COVID issues. And the element here was to ensure that as much as Kenya was going through a lockdown, a lot of our people are really from informal settlements and also operate informal economic activities. Meaning that once you said that you are locking down the city, particularly in Nairobi, most of the people and the majority of them had no income options. So one of the key things that the government did decide to do was to have a national hygiene program whereby they would have a way of transferring funds from the national government to most of the informal workers, who would then get almost daily living wages by helping to clean up the local environment, whether in public spaces, schools, roads, and all those kind of things. So the program first kicked off around April 2020, first as a pilot program to see how things would go, so that we could see whether we could be able to utilize what we call labor-intensive approaches to creating sustainable public good in the urban development sector. During the initial program, one of the key things that we managed to do was to engage public officers. For the first time, I think in the public service, we were able to create a toolkit that most of them would be able to use in terms of communication. And therefore, the first element of the project rollout was very clear and was able to roll out in a very easy way. For the first time again, we were also able to use social media to address concerns that a lot of the social people had, and particularly within the informal settlements, to accept the element of having a lockdown and not having a place where they can go to their normal daily cures where they used to get their money from, but be able to join Kazi Mtaani as a program. So the first thing that we were trying to do is to sell Kazi Mtaani as a program, and therefore using various options, including editorial activations, social media activations, storytelling in a very big way, and also photography, which we were using on the social media spaces. And out of that, we were able to reach almost 1 million and engage and get about 96% of the objectives that we had reached out to get. So in the first instance was to try out a solution that had not been done previously, particularly in the public sector. A lot of these things have been done with the private sector, but within the public sector, nothing had been done. With that, we were also able to use the president of Kenya as one of the endorsement parties. And I remember during the last national day, which we call Madaraka Day in Kenya, Kazi Mtaani was actually one of the featured programs that was able to be articulated, and they were able to see how it all operates. So that, in a nutshell, is Kazi Mtaani for us, and we are very proud that we are at least a finalist this year. Thank you.
Lovely to hear. Thank you so much, Alfred, and well done. Ojo, can we just go to you and hear what the work that you put forward is?
Thank you very much, Nkiru. So I'm sharing my presentation and entry for the 2021 SABRE Award. So over the last 24 months, all five entries that we made into the SABRE Award have gotten glowing commendations. 3 had won the Diamond awards, and 2 received certificate of excellence. So it's a privilege to share with you winning entry for 2021, SABRE Award 2021. Touching life through a determined school child, Dele Fathia. We did this for Lumos Nigeria. Lumos Nigeria is a global renewable brand in Nigeria, determined to bridge the electricity supply gap through what we have in abundance, which is the sun. So this was actually a spontaneous campaign. In February, on February 10, 2020, last year, just a few weeks before a total lockdown due to this very silly virus, our insider and intelligence team picked up a trendy story of a young schoolgirl, Dele, who was photographed and was trending on social media. We saw her doing her schoolwork. So you can see the picture to your right on your screen, where she was actually trying to do her schoolwork with the aid of illumination from an ATM facility of a bank. 2 things came to our mind. 1, Dele is very determined to pursue learning. 2, she was doing it at a risk to her life. She's a young girl, and that means she was actually going out at night, which was not very secure. But another risk was to our health, because we know that in West Africa, malaria is a big issue, and their mosquitoes are actually more active at night. So we thought Dele determination can be a focal point for a campaign that we can use to demonstrate social impact. And so we called our client and said, look, let's use Dele as a touch of point of contact to demonstrate 2 things. 1, social impact on how we can change lives, and 2, demonstrate how very quickly we can bridge electricity issues in Nigeria. Right now, a better part of Nigerian population don't actually have access to grid power, and the 60%, 40% who actually have access to electricity are not guaranteed 5 hours of daily supply. But one of the things we also saw working with Lumos was that this was a quicker way of bridging this gap. I mean, we're using solar and renewable. It's friendly to environment, it's cheaper to the pocket, it's efficient, and it's safe. And we thought Daily was not only an opportunity for social impact storytelling, but also an opportunity to demonstrate how this works. And so we set out to do things. One, demonstrate how very quickly you can actually solve an electricity issue, and to show clearly to the community how this can change Daily's life. So we were determined that next school work that Daily was going to do within that week was going to be at our home, not outside of our house, in the safety of our home, and with electricity. We were very determined. We wanted it to be the next school work within that same week. So we were convinced as an agency. Lumos were very convinced that this was something they wanted to do. And so we set out. Lumos operate from Lagos, and they set out to Ondo State, which is about 3 hours drive from Lagos. And we wanted to do this, like I said, before the next school homework for Daily. So I spoke, let me just share a bit about Lumos, our client. Lumos is a global renewable brand that has presence in Africa, already connects over 100,000 families. At the time we entered this award, over 100,000, but we are heading to 150,000 right now. Families and small businesses to its service off-grid. And it uses very simple mobile technology to connect electricity service to its customers. And it has a warranty period for 5 years for all its consumers. So it's very cheap with a mobile, by just loading rich credit on your mobile phone, you can actually have electricity service. So it's a simple technology that you can use to create solutions for electricity. So our action explained, we think that we thought within the agency that there's the Nigerian can-do spirit. That Daily was demonstrating it in this very trending picture that was everywhere on social media, and that we're going to use this to demonstrate that can actually inspire other worthy action that are worthy of emulation and reward. So our first step contacted the social media user who shared the picture to, one, ensure that we're actually not working with fake news, and then get the approval to actually work with the vision they shared. And so once we had that, we were able to then provide accurately the information that we needed to Lumos, who then immediately dispatched a team 3 hours to Ondo State, where Daily lives. And within 48 hours, we connected Daily to electricity. We wanted the message to be community-based. So our message was deliberately conveyed in Yoruba, which is predominant where Daily lives, Pidgin, which is also a very grassroots language, and English to have a widespread impact. And so we pitched this to Ondo State's largest local TV and radio station to actually cover the entire process. So the TV station actually went to Daily School. Daily didn't know what was that her biggest challenge to doing school work was going to change. So they went to school, spoke to the head of the school, the community head, and then brought her home. They wanted the state to capture the moment Daily's family actually get connected to life. Sustainable, affordable, and environment friendly. So that happened. It was on radio, it was on TV, and then we also amplified this on social media. We had generated about 9.5 million impressions across various platforms on social media, and 5 million audience were reached. And what was good, what we wanted to do was also to create that impact on the brand. And we saw clear inquiries, not only in Ondo State, but in that regional market about how solar can help to solve electricity issue in the country. There were 94% of the engagement on social media in terms of the sentiment were positive. We had 0 negative, but again, social media is a trolling platform. So we had a bit of neutral, but 94%, which was a great deal, was positive in sentiment. What we also love about what we've done was that it inspired others in the same industry, such as BBJ, to start doing similar things. So they believe that this was a very strong, exemplary social impact, and we started seeing more of these with competition. So these were example of how this played out on social media. This is Dele and the Lumos team, the moment she was connected to electricity. We shared this on social media. People were asking, this was from Ibadan, saying, hey, I hope this was free to Dele, and Lumos here answering them that this is forever free to Dele. She will never pay for electricity charges as far as sun and Super Africa. And then we had, we also did it across mainstream platform, leading newspapers, and we had also online media. But what we are most blessed to see, the federal government, as part of its economic recovery plan, has actually voted huge sum of money to connect 25 million Nigerians to the kind of solar system that we connected Dele and her family to. So we see clearly that we've seen a huge impact from this kind of campaign, and by the end of this year, we're going to see more families connected to electricity via solar. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share this social impact.
Thank you so much, Odio. Thank you so much, Alfred. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Portia. I mean, it is without little doubt that we can see why you are the finalist. But I think more than that is, it's just well done on the impact, you know, that you are making. So thank you so much. Best wishes. Ladies and gentlemen, it's also important to let you know that at 4 p.m. Nigerian time today, which is 5 p.m. South African time, which is 3 p.m. Ghanaian time, which is 2 p.m. Moroccan time, we will be having the Sabre Awards happening virtually. You can join using the same links, and it promises to be a truly, truly exciting time. So thank you. I would like to move right quickly onto the program, onto the next person on the agenda. And I would like to invite the virtual stage the president of the Africa Public Relations Association, who we have had and seen at several times during the conference. I would like to invite on stage Mr. Yomi Badejo Okusaya, who we also popularly call YBO. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please give YBO a virtual round of applause?
Thank you. Look, I'll start my video. Thank you very much, Nkiru, and let me start by again thanking every one of you who has been on. Today is day 3, and we're almost maxing 100. It shows that the interest has indeed been very, very high. I just thought that before we close the conference, I'll give a quick recap on what has happened in the year, and then also kind of give you a pointer to what is going to happen in the next 1 year. Definitely, it's been a very challenging year for the association and the whole world as one. Of course, you know that we're unable to host the 2020 edition, which was supposed to be in Dar es Salaam, and we had to abort, and now we've had to put this virtually. We held a couple of webinars in the course of the year, in order to make up for that and so that we're not silent. And I thank every one of you that was able to join us at those webinars. We intend to continue with them, and some of these topics that we have raised here, the conversation will continue on those webinars. The Secretariat is still hosted here in Lagos, Nigeria, and our host, CMC Connect. We thank them for their generosity because they have hosted the Secretariat absolutely free of charge. No utility charges, no space charges, and all. So we thank those. We thank CMC Connect for that. As we all know, or most of us do know, the Secretariat is really manned by one person, and Taiwo, whom many of you have interacted with. I want to use this opportunity to thank her for the great work that she has done. The reward for good work is more work. So she will be expected to do a lot more work in the course of this year. Like I said, we had concluded plans for Tanzania. We had even paid for the facility and all of a host of other things. Unfortunately, COVID sent us otherwise. In this vein, we will also be hopefully convening physically, or at best, at worst, a hybrid in 2022. And we are looking forward to having in-person conferences again, and where we'll be able to see. Now, we have received interest for, I believe, 4 countries who are willing to host the 2022 edition. So we'll be visiting. It's our normal practice to announce the next host of the conference, but unfortunately, because of the challenges we have right now, we cannot tell you exactly. But what I can tell you is that we're going to any one of the following 4 countries. They are the ones who have shown interest in bidding for the next conference: South Africa, Zambia, Tanzania, and Uganda. Those are the 4 countries who have indicated their interest in hosting APRA 2022. We're going to ask them, for them to consolidate on their bids, to give us further details, and then we're going to examine, and then we'll take a decision, and we will announce to you during the course of the year. What we will assure you is that you will know well in advance where you're heading in 2022. I use this opportunity to ask those who want to bid to please make sure that they do their homework very well. The bid is very, very, very competitive, and may the best country win. EXCO will continue. The Executive Council will continue to serve in the best interest of the association. We've taken some decisions on your behalf that we believe will augur well for the association. Sometimes we've had to consult outside the Executive Council, and we've done that. Like, for instance, yesterday we did have a discussion with the expanded Executive Council made up of past presidents and secretary generals, and we have determined the way forward. But we also, I use this as a call to all our members, whether they're national associations or individuals. Please, you need to be current with your dues. You need to be current with your dues. I know the times are challenging, but many of us belong to other associations. And even we have a time limit where your name is taken off the register if you do not comply. We don't want to do that, but please, we request that if you'd like to identify with what APRA is doing, you need to put your money where your mouth is. That's how it is said. No offense intended. I want to use this to appeal to the leadership of the National Public Relations Association. There are many things that we want to pick up on the continent. We already have 2 offers, solid offers. One from the president of the African Development Bank, who has said to me that we can partner, especially in the area of development in Africa. And he also mentioned that during his speech yesterday. I've also heard from the African Union and they're looking at a project where they want APRA to partner with them, courtesy of Ms. Wayne Musa Bayana, who you met 2 days ago. But for us to be able to do well, what I usually say is for people to take us seriously, we need to take ourselves seriously as PR practitioners. If we do not take our profession seriously, if we do not take our association seriously, then really it's begging the question, asking other people to take us seriously. Our relevance will continue to be in question if we, as practitioners, refuse to take ourselves and our own business seriously. So please, I use this opportunity to request that all national associations whose leadership here represented should please, let's do the meeting. For those who are not members of the African Public Relations Association, please visit our website, www.afpra.org, and you'll be able to pick up a form and get details of how you can be members of the association. One of the things we say is that for you to be a bona fide member of APRA, you must get the go-ahead of your national association where you have a thriving national association in place. Please join us in improving the impact of public relations across the continent. Finally, next year, in the next 1 year, we would like to use it to strengthen issues of membership, finance, relevance, capacity. We will continue to also engage with other stakeholders on the continent so that we can sell the relevance of public relations. Also, in the coming year, we would like to be filling our succession pipeline. And that means that many people who we have contributed our quota, and we're still contributing and we still contribute, but we believe that there are other people who have great ideas, also members of this association, and they should be given a chance to be in the leadership of the association. So during the course of this 1 year, we're going to be concentrating on lots of those things. We'll be putting together a team that is going to help us in the area of sustainable elections to leadership and so on and so forth. But all of this will be communicated to you. Let me end my short address by appreciating all those who work tirelessly, because this perhaps will be, apart from Sabre Awards in the evening, for this conference in proper, my last opportunity to address the association, or the group, or the platform. I want to appreciate all those who work tirelessly to make sure that we had a very, 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 very successful virtual conference, the first of its kind. We had our fears, we had our apprehension, but they really worked very hard. I want to recognize the Vice President, Mrs. Robin De Villiers, who was really in charge of the faculty and working with the coordinator with that faculty together. Thank you very much, Robin. The Secretary General, Jane Gitao, the numerous meetings we had to make sure this happened. Of course, I must recognize Taiwo, our coordinator, who has done an excellent job. I'm sure she would want to look for someone who might sleep after all of this, because she's worked very tirelessly. I also want to recognize those people from CMC Connect, Sukomi, Oguni, Debo Rahimi, all the other members of staff of CMC Connect that one way or the other have led support to this. Padipe, Shade, or everybody who has one way or the other supported. And of course, the technical team that's been working in the command center. Thank you very much for your support. I'd also like to give a big shout out to Hiro Lumidi, who has done an excellent job. Judging from the comments that I've seen in the chat, you all agree with me that perhaps we should appoint her as an official and permanent moderator for APRA. Thank you very much, but the biggest thanks goes to you. Without you, it wouldn't have happened. Wherever you are in any part of the world, and also people who've joined us from Paul Holmes, Max Baer, Justin Green, everyone. everybody from all parts of Africa that are doing this. Thank you very much for supporting the work of the Executive Council. At this point in time, I'll hand over to Nkiru to take us further.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for the update. Thank you for also your leadership. And we must also in turn, thank you for the passion. Thank you for the leadership that you consistently provide to the association. I have been notified by the Secretariat that there was an omission, and we apologize most sincerely for it. May we therefore call Ken Kamau. We are going to give him a few minutes to make his presentation. Ken, please take the virtual stage and please make your presentation. Thanks. I think we do have 2 more activities right after you. Over to you. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you very much for that opportunity. Our campaign was around the government banning the importation of second-hand clothes and footwear in the country. And to that end, the ban was effected on April of 2020. And we all know that in Africa, second-hand clothes and foot is a big thing. So for us, we were looking at the possibility, could second-hand clothes and footwear be a source of transmitting the COVID-19, because that's where the ban was pegged on second-hand clothes and footwear as a source or as a way of spreading coronavirus. And we truly understood the impact that it will have on millions and millions of livelihood in Kenya. And the other thing is that through that time, we look at stakeholders. Who can we work with that will be able to uplift the ban, but bring facts to the table, number one, and educate people how huge the industry is, the second-hand clothes and footwear. And according to our assessments and analysis, the sector almost employs at our initial analysis, the sector employed almost 500,000 Kenyans. But as we kept digging data and we commissioned the Institute of Economic Affairs to do a proper research, we discovered that indirectly and directly was